Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here to review Top Gun. I feel the need for something. Maybe it's a catchphrase or a movie quote, but at the end of the day, maybe also people can probably feel the need for me to just review this movie. For those of you that are probably very much get Top Gun, could get confused with Iron Eagle or probably any other Air Force movies at some point, like the Top Gun Maverick film will probably get you confused with the Owen Wilson Behind Enemy Lines film because it feels very similar. But anyways, Top Gun. This, of course, to be the classic film that gives you the Danger Zone song, is to really have a lot of people say that, yeah, this is another one of those like military Air Force kind of movies that there might be a lot of jargon in here, but also like there's a lot of good balancing of stuff that doesn't make it too heavy on the actual military aspect of this film. Like it goes on and has it to be more easily for everyone, I think, to enjoy, even though also there is some heartbreaking moments in this movie for those of you that have never gone on to see it, but probably know what's going on for the big parts of it anyways, because anybody who's probably not even lived under a rock probably knows what happens within this film for how wide reaching it is. And also how big Top Gun Maverick really was. For those of you who had never even gone to see Top Gun, you probably went to see Top Gun before seeing Top Gun Maverick. But anyways, Top Gun is to, of course, be the nickname of a fighter weapon school. They explain that right out of the gate of this film, as we have air traffic controllers going on and being at this carrier that goes on and starts waving these jets to kind of open this film. And gotta say, the third act of this movie, man, if you took the audio out, there's just like craziness just kind of going on. Like by the third act, I'm like, I don't understand what the heck is going on. 4 or 5, like, yeah, it's all over the goddamn place. The third act, I think, is like the weakest point, and there's not enough footage to help us understand everything. Because the third act isn't exactly in the air shot very well, but it is what it is, I guess, at that point. But anyways, like, the otherwise approach of this story of a love story plus also two good friends feeling the closest they can ever be to family, and they're having just one common goal of trying to be the best at what they do, and eventually having rivalries, like, of course, Maverick and Iceman go on to be kind of opposites of one another, but eventually we find in like Top Gun Maverick where they become really good friends, where they're text buddies. And anyways, so Top Gun, we obviously have to also point out the volleyball scene that is very iconic, strangely enough. That eventually in Top Gun Maverick, I think they have a football scene from memory to kind of replace the whole volleyball scene. To be like, hey, yeah, we're going to do football in this one instead of volleyball. To try to keep kind of the same kind of pattern, but do something a little bit different. Top Gun is to be interesting in a number of different ways. Besides the almost family friendship, but also the secret romance that is going on between Maverick and Charlie, we come to find in this film. We seem to have a guy like Maverick who not only is to be a guy that is having a little bit too much fun even in the Air Force, which is the wrong place to do so. But, anyways, we see that also Maverick is to also be a guy that doesn't take no for an answer. And that leads him into feeling like a woman is to lose that loving feeling and try to figure out a way to get her to basically not say no and kind of keep pushing the envelope of their relationship that Maverick comes to find out is actually going to be instructor and instructee. And Maverick is like, oh no, well, like you could just see when the girl comes in, like just egg completely on his face as he's just like, motherfucker, God, like, oh man, like, so, like, it had to have been her. Like, it had to have made the most sense for her to just kind of come out of nowhere, and it's the first time ever meeting her, and then he finds out that she's his instructor, and there's this whole kind of back and forth thing of them busting chops of one another when others are looking, but secretly they're like passing notes to one another, and they're making their way to her place where Maverick is going on and needing to take a shower and tell her about his dead parents, and and have them become closer and closer to where we come to find that the only thing that could break the two of them apart, besides that loving feeling, is a friend of theirs that is to die. It seems very cryptic, but I'm sure a lot of people who have already heard of or seen or known something about this movie probably knows the big, huge thing that happens in this film that really just ties it all together to be so impactful, and probably a number of people probably cried when it happened. But anyways, I have to go on and keep that big, fat, succulent thing a secret now, don't I, of what exactly that is. Even though everybody knows what it is, Duck Duck Goose. But anyways, uh, everybody knows, come on. Secretly, deliciously, you know, believe me. Steel third. Anyways, so we go on past the point of Maverick, who has had this significant loss in his life, a family and then close friend. And then Maverick has to go on and figure out a way to pick up the pieces of his life and be forced to work with people that find him dangerous and don't like him. And Maverick needs to eventually go on and figure out how he can graduate from this school and then be put back into the real world where he's put into real situations, and when push comes to shove, is he going to go on and is he going to pull the trigger? Is he going to step up and be able to help Iceman when he needs him most, having by the end of it all to be a good wingman? We also have to come to find that Top Gun is to, of course, have a parody done of it, which was called Hot Shots, which has Charlie Sheen in it. If you're going on and looking more of a variety of Top Gun-like things, eventually you could also look at Hot Shots, that is to eventually be a parody of Top Gun, and then the sequel of it just kind of goes all over the place and just kind of does whatever it needs to be. just as an action film, because really, like, Top Gun was a oneer. And really, at this point, you could probably go on and just kind of look at other kind of films that are just to have jets in them also, or this kind of approach of military esh like films. But anyways, Top Gun also was to very much like feel similar to Ghost Rider, bizarrely, when I was to have gone on and watched it, because of how Blaze was dealing with the loss of his father and having to basically go through that whole movie being in the shadow of his father and trying to come out of it being like, hey, this is all me that's doing this. I'm making these jumps. Or maybe there is just a angel on his shoulder or something else. But anyways, so Top Gun obviously for me was a lot of fun. I would go out of my way to say that Top Gun is still, I'll say, a solid good movie. Like, I'd also gone on to recently, well, in another channel, which may not be here, of a review, but like, I have gone on to recently watch Risky Business, and gotta say that like a lot of like the lovemaking scenes that Tom Cruise does, like, it's very similar. It's a lot of like blowing in the wind kind of things, and like, I don't know if that's a weird pattern that all the lovemaking scenes had to go into, but there always seems to be this kind of weird pattern of Tom Cruise lovemaking scenes at a certain period of time, which is strange. Uh, it's like the woman has to do like kind of all of the the skin work, and then Tom Cruise just kind of comes in and starts making out, and then they kind of like, okay, all right, like, cut. Um, but anyways, um, I guess it'll be really interesting to see Eyes Wide Shut, which I think I've seen a good chunk of that movie. Which I don't think it is as risque as I thought it would be, but if anything, it'd be really interesting to check that movie out at some point. Anyways, but yeah, I had fun with this movie. I really did enjoy it. I didn't feel that you had to learn some military jargon to understand this movie. It was simple enough. So by all means, go out of your way to see Top Gun. If you are to find an app called Pluto TV, you'll be able to find it there, watch it there. But alternatively, if you want to go out of your way to see, you can watch this movie for free on a bootleggish mean of an app. Then by all means, if you have a Google Play Store and a mobile device, like, I would recommend a tablet or iPad, but if you have neither, and if you just have a phone, you'll be able to hopefully find these apps either way. Hopefully you'll go on and find an app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or Clede Plus, Klede Plus. You'll hopefully be able to watch this movie for absolutely free. And a number of other things you've probably never gone on to even seen or heard of in your life, because there's a lot of that's available upon that app. With that said, I think it's about that time to get into full-on breakdown and spoilers of this whole entire film, because yeah, I was heavily cryptically talking about this film, because honestly, it's a lot of just fighter exercises kind of going on. Really, like, a lot of it is to just be neck and neck Iceman and Maverick. Like, okay, like, it seems that Iceman is kind of in the lead, and then Maverick has to kind of swoop in, and he's like so in second place by a very small margin, and it's like, oh man, if only he can go on and just get there, and the two of them will be very even. And then we get to a point where they are kind of neck and neck, and they have to go on and they have to kind of both work together in a scenario. And really, that leads to, by the end of the film, Maverick coming back after everything that has kind of gone on and transpired. and finally kind of earn his wings back and earn um, his faculties, and also kind of be very much like Luke Skywalker by the end of Star Wars, where he's kind of going on and asking for Ben to give him some assistance. And Ben is like, use the Force, mother. Come on, man. Don't you know the Force? Like, you're gonna be the one that's like the one that like destroys the Sith. Until there's gonna be more Star Wars movies and then new Sith characters will be cropping up anyways, and then, well, like, Luke, you accomplish nothing. But eventually, none of the prophecy will really ever accomplish anything, as they assumed that Anakin was the one, and then, man, that didn't happen. And then Luke came in, it's like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then it's like, oh, well, there's always going to be more Sith, right? There's always going to be more bad guys as well as there's good guys present. There always is going to be the yin and yang of the Star Wars universe. So there's always going to be somebody. Kind of like Top Gun. When eventually people die, there's always going to be somebody that just kind of comes right in and replaces people. But anyways, like in the early part of Top Gun, I also think that it's really interesting how we had Cougar, who was to go on and be really shooken up by that firefight, and Maverick has to kind of swoop in to kind of lock Cougar in. But like, hey man, like, let's go, like, let's get to the carrier, like, we're running out of gas, like, let's just kind of like let's not think anything else about but besides landing this plane. Like, let's kind of dump everything off to the side and let's lock in here. So yeah, Cougar ends up going on and ends up getting stuck into the air, and he's just like completely like phased out, to where they really have to rein him back in to the point of him being able to land in the carrier. And he's so floppy and lopsided that eventually they make the landing. But yeah, it's a process. And then we have Maverick that eventually goes on and ends up kind of being almost in a similar direction after the spin out, where he's having a hard time locking in to fire upon people because he himself has been through a fire accident that has kind of left him just shaken, to the point of him having a hard time pulling the trigger on anything, and him just kind of being very much like unsafe and dangerous, like Iceman just loves to tell him that he is. So with that said, it also is quite funny how Maverick was to have gone on and had a bit of information that Charlie wants from him, as we would go on to have Maverick was like, well, yeah, like, I was to fly right on top of this Russian MiG, and I flipped in the bird, like, Goose took a picture of him. We had a good old time, like, we waved at him, said our hellos. Because, yeah, they weren't going to try to fire at him. They were going to just try to hope that, if anything, they weren't going to get into any engagements and go on to the need to, like, fight to the death. And because, of course, also, every one of these jets, they say right out of the gate, it's like, well, hey, like, the taxpayers are paying for this. Like, you don't own the plane, the taxpayers do. So, yeah, and every one of those planes costs a huge chunk of change every time you break one of them. So, we eventually would come to find at some point that they break one of them, but it ends up being a pure accident, that there was a faulty thing going on with the plane that eventually they'll talk about later in the film. But anyways, in a very roundabout way. I've talked about the film, but also not really talked about the film. So, if anything, we're going to go on and we're going to talk about the big, huge, massive fart of a spoiler that everybody knows frickin' anyways. So, with that said, if you're going on and you're feeling froggy, that you're probably going to feel ruined by this film if you know what goes on with it, then by all means, at this point, I'm going to talk about that and then get into spoilers and breakdowns and everything, anyways. So, for whatever reason, if you're to go on and not know what happens to a certain ER doctor, uh, well, Revenge of the Nerds, ER, anyways. So, with that said, spoilers, everybody. So, I feel that Goose being dead in this film is to be known by everybody. Everybody who has never even gone on to see Top Gun, they know that Goose dies. Weirdly enough. If anything, at this point, when we go on, we probably watch Top Gun, we're waiting for it to happen. Like, how does it transpire? Like, how is it going to really affect Maverick from here on out? Like, is he going to have one last speech before he croaks? Or is he going to just be there lying like a log in the water? Because coincidentally, they end up falling into the water conveniently for the story. And yeah, like, it's this emotional, like, Maverick is latching on to Goose, and they're like, well, hey, we got to pull him out of here. And then Maverick is to kind of be forced to let go because he is just locked onto Goose because he's basically family to him. They discuss that in the movie about Maverick telling Goose, is like, well, yeah, you're the only family I've left. And Goose is just like, well, yeah, like, I know that you're kind of following in your footsteps, your father, but hey, like, there has to be more than that. Like, there has to be more, that you just really want to be the best at this. So, plus also, like, Goose has a lot riding on this. It's like, hey man, like, I have a family to support. Like, you can do whatever you want, but if anything, for me, like, I really need this job. Uh, but anyways, like, he needs to be the best at it. So it's honestly also really interesting how, like, you would maybe possibly think that, like, maybe they talked about this in Top Gun Maverick, but you would think that since Maverick sees this Goose family as family, you would think then, like, he would try to maybe support them, or maybe he would have gone on and it talked something about that somewhere in the sequel. But also, there's to be quite a bit of time that is to pass, that is to kind of be interesting to see how that all breaks down in those films. But anyways, so also it's quite interesting by the end of this tale how Maverick goes on and says that he would be interested in becoming an instructor. Where in Top Gun Maverick, yeah, he is a instructor to Goose's son, and it's a whole story about that. And we have, like, Glenn Powell that kind of has to be the Iceman to, would it be Goose's son's Maverick, and there's a moment by the end there where Glenn goes on and saves them a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, what a hero you are. You haven't really done anything in this film but this. Okay, great. Uh, it's good that you were here once. But anyways, it's also really interesting in this film because now we're getting into spoilers anyways. It's kind of cool that Iceman does go on and actually get Top Gun. Plus, I like the fact that they end up doing the whole plaque thing in this movie. And, like, they set it up to be like, hey, yeah, you guys got to get your name on that plaque so you eventually you'll go on and you'll be an instructor. And we have Goose who's like, yeah, there's 2 O's in Goose. Yeah. By the way you play things out in this story, there's going to be no O's in Goose. But anyways, uh but it's a bit of a funny banter that they go on, and they think that they're gonna go on to be like top dogs and and gonna go on and beat everybody in the story. But anyways, so with that said, let's go on and let's try to break down this film. I'm honestly gonna try a bat out of hell to kind of really rush through this whole review because I know how long it's gonna take. And I know like I'll have to break it down in like the smallest of detail to try to push along to try to get this done quickly. But anyways, thank you for going on and listening to anything that I have to say because I'm going out of my way to find that I'm trying to just keep pushing a lot of reviews before I start getting videos onto this channel. And hopefully one of these will stand out somewhere. Or hopefully I'll just really just keep doing videos really just for fun because I'm honestly just I'm enjoying getting a fresh start, but I'm also looking at it as like, hey, let's actually do something new and let's be smart about this for once. And hopefully maybe Top Gun is maybe going to be a smarter choice for once. Um because maybe I finally have freaking cleared my head, and as well as also I'm kind of very busy dealing with a lot, but I've kind of really taken this time to kind of make a possible better channel for the future by just trying to make better choices and be able to take the time in making those choices is making me a better content creator, I hope. Or person that is to be a YouTuber or whatever goofy title that has to be given to me, even though I'm really just a person, anyways. Because if I'm to go on and rush to get this out, believe me, like, I make the worst possible choices. But if I can take the time to really, like, sift through and be like, okay, let's really think this out, like, I think I make better choices, but that's all depending on whether or not that those good choices are to really matter to anybody. Um, but anyways, it's about that time before I put my foot in my mouth to go on and use my mouth in a different way of going into detail about this film. So let's do so. So, the very beginning of this film, we of course have Indiana Ocean present day, whatever present day would really be at this point. In the 80s. Because I'm sure a lot of this stuff is probably very outdated for how many decades ago it was. I'm sure there's a number of different kinds of ways that they do Air Force stuff nowadays. Anyways, so we were going to have a guy that's just kind of looking around and just kind of good morning to everybody. And then we have a guy named Stinger that comes in and is to talk to a guy named Ghost Rider and ask who's all out, as they come to find there's some bogies making their way. Ghost Rider goes on and mentions about how there's Cougar, Merlin, Maverick, and Goose. And immediately we'd go on to have Stinger who's like, Maverick and Goose, like those guys. So we'd go on to have all these guys out there, and so as these threats start making their way in, we have at a point where these bogies are actually, I believe, Russians because of the red star that's on the side of their jets. If I'm wrong, then please correct me. But so we'd have these bogeys that make their way in here, and they don't go on and they don't try to like shoot them down or fire upon them so quickly. If anything, there is more of like a threatening, and there is more of like a like, hey, since we can't really go on and want to try to engage in them because that might start a war or something like that anyways, they try to go on and just be like, well, hey, yeah, since they're not going on and they're not firing on us first, because Stinger's orders is like, well, hey, if they don't fire on you, you don't fire on them. Because even at one point, we have Goose and Maverick that are going and lock on to one of the Russians, but there's nothing that they're going to do because Stinger goes on and tells them, hey, don't fire unless fired first. So, here's where we go on. Since Maverick and Goose, again, are not going on and having themselves in a firefight, they just decide to fuck around. So, Maverick and Goose, they get alongside the MiG, or the Russian, and since they can't fight him anyways, they decide to go on and they use their jet and flip upside down and have the Russian or the MiG underneath them, and they're flipping him the bird, and Goose is taking a photograph of them, and they're just kind of joking around. Um, so eventually, as neither one of them are getting in any kind of firefight, they eventually decide to just pull away. And they're to go on and realize, hey, yeah, we're kind of losing some gas here. We should probably go back to the carrier because these guys have kind of made their way off. So we come to find that Maverick and Goose, while they're trying to make it to the carrier first, all of a sudden they're going on and hearing through the radio that Cougar is to completely be shut off from his partner, who is Merlin, that's from behind him, who's played by, I think, Tim Robbins. And as Merlin is going on and talking to Cougar, like, hey man, it's time for us to get back. Hey man, we're running out of gas. Hey man, where are you going? Like, if anything, let's get back to the carrier. We need to land. And the more and more Cougar is distracted by the picture of his family and is just having possibly an anxiety attack, or is to just be kind of just lost in becoming a zombified version of himself that just can't really make a decision to anything. So as Maverick, soon as he lands in the carrier, is to overhear what's going on with Cougar, and he's like, nope, we're going to go on and we're going to go back for him, and we're going to stay there until he lands. And Goose is like, what are you doing, Mav? Like, if anything, hey, we should have landed. And Maverick is like, nope, going back for Cougar. And Goose is like, well, okay, like, I'm just going to stuck with you. So they both go back. So of course Stinger, the superior officer here, is of course upset with what they're doing, but it's like there's nothing he can do to stop them. So Maverick makes his way back to Cougar, and Merlin, and it's like, well, hey, have any of you guys gone on and seen any aircraft carrier around? And Merlin goes on to say, it's like, well, hey, we have a little bit of problem over here. Honestly, like, wouldn't you think that, like, Merlin would be able to control the plane if for whatever reason Cougar can't? Like, if Cougar is not doing dick, like, wouldn't you think that Merlin would be able to take control? Like, that would be my thought, right? Um, I don't know if exactly he would be able to land the plane, but you would think he would be able to, like, control the plane, right? Like, in all my time of going on and seeing an Air Force movie of sorts, like, yeah, I would go on to know that. Like, it's not that Merlin is to just be like, well, yeah, I'm defenseless, there's nothing I can do. No, like, he should be able to take some kind of control of the plane. But that's not what's going on here. Merlin is just weirdly defenseless. So, unless if you are an Air Force fighter jet person, let me know in the comments below. Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, like Merlin is fucked. Like, yeah. So I'm sure there's a lot of people wildly that just kind of come out of the woodwork, like, yeah, I was in the Air Force, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. My father was in 20 years in the Navy, but if anything, there's a lot of, like, there's some maybe military jargon here or there, but if anything, like, the stories have been kind of very far and few apart. So yeah, like, if anything, like, it's just more that I've kind of much more relied on movies than anything of my dad's kind of just Navy stories. Plus also, like, my dad honestly right now has kind of dementia. Well, kind of. He has it. So if anything, kind of stories of the past have kind of been completely gone, but it's still nice to have him around, in whatever capacity. So so with that said, uh so Maverick is pulling Cougar in. Maverick tells Cougar to stay on his wing, and Maverick is going to take Cougar all the way in. So the further and further they get to the carrier, we have Merlin that is screaming at Cougar to pull up, to power increase, to get higher and higher, and eventually they do land. It's kind of very rickety, but they do land. So Cougar goes on and makes his way to Stinger, the superior officer, and Stinger is looking at Cougar. It's like, well, hey, shouldn't it be in the med bay, or shouldn't it be in sick bay? When I hear sick bay, I immediately think of like Star Trek. Saying med bay sounds better to me, but whatever. I guess it is what it is. Sick bay. I've never heard of like sick bay in the Navy or whatever, but I don't know. Like, my dad also knows a lot of Star Trek, so it is what it is. So Cougar goes on and is to say that the only thing that he was thinking about in the air is that he could have made his child an orphan and wife a widow, and he had never gone on to see either one of them for so long. And Stinger is going on and trying to tell him, it's like, well, yeah, it happens to the best of us. And Cougar is like, no, like this is something different. And so Cougar goes on, drops his wings, and walks away. And next up, we have Stinger that has to go on and chew out Goose and Maverick as the two of them are looking at Cougar, and they're like, "Hey man, what's going on? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, whatever." So coincidentally, as Goose and Maverick make their way into Stinger's office, and Cougar had just gone on to drop his wings right in front of Stinger, Stinger goes on to ream these guys for the fact that they were to have gone on and take it upon themselves to kind of disobey a direct order and go back for Cougar the way they did, because they were taking a risk to a fighter jet, and it's not their fighter jet, it's a taxpayers fighter jet. And so, but eventually they did good. Like, they did something good here. They pulled Cougar back in. So it's hard to go on and exactly discipline him, but also Stinger is to mention more of Maverick's backstory about how he had gone on to even uh, have so many different demerits or things against him, and had also kind of stooped some general's daughter or something like that. And then they recount that at some points in the story. So Stinger goes on and tells Maverick and Goose that he has no other choice but to basically give them their dream shot, for them to go on and make their way to Miramar, California, and make their way into the Top Gun school to become the best fighter jet pilots in the United States, or whatever the school is to really kind of cross over. So, because Cougar was to have been number one, but now Maverick and Goose are, because, again, Cougar gave up his wings. So, and the funny thing of it is, it's like, well, hey, yeah, like, if you don't do well in Top Gun, he'll go and he'll send you off to be flying a cargo ship in Hong Kong or Siberia or something. So, they ship him off to Miramar. Luckily, I got that right. California. So the next thing we see is Maverick with his motorcycle flying. He's riding past with his motorcycle, this jet going off, and he's like, "Yeah, all right." Like, we basically get the iconic scene that comes from this movie. That if anybody kind of cuts to a certain normal scene in Top Gun, it's usually this scene right here. So we now cut to a character known as Jester. And he goes over throughout this whole class to talk about these ratios and scenarios, like the 3-to-1, the 5-to-1, the 10-to-1, and something wrong. He goes on and on about it. But also, like, the main thing that he's talking about is that all of these ratios and scenarios, it's all just a dogfight. So that way people who don't understand terminologies of the Air Force can be like, yeah, it'll all just be called a dogfight is what they're really in. And so we then, after Jester goes on and talks about all these ratios and scenarios and all these goofy other things, he then turns it over to Mike Metcalf, who's mainly known as Viper, in which I will call him that throughout the rest of this film. Viper comes in and tells everybody how they're really here to be the best of the best, and eventually people start looking around to see, like, well, hey, how can we tell who the best of the best are? And eventually, as everybody starts to look around, eventually Viper goes on and says, hey, yeah, I know that you're all looking to figure out who the best of the best are. And if you guys haven't been paying much attention, they're all on this plaque on behind you here. So Viper goes on and looks at the plaque, and then makes his way back to the front of the whiteboard. And so Viper goes on to explain a lot of people who end up becoming the best of the best, or Top Gun. They always have the option of becoming an instructor, and also just being like touted as being Top Gun. But anyways, we'd come to find that when Viper goes on and looks at Maverick, and there's always to be like those kind of people that are to be basically like, well, like I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna beat every challenge you have. Like, look at Ashton Kutcher from the movie The Guardian, where Ashton Kutcher's character comes in and he basically says, yeah, like all of those high scores that are on these boards, I'm going to break them all. Like, I'm going to break every single one of them. And then it does get to the point where Kevin Costner's character is like, well, okay then, like, Ashton Kutcher, if you want to go on and you want to break all these records, then, like, we'll give you a whole day for you to break them all. And he does. So, and Maverick is kind of the same thing here, where he's like, well, yeah, like, if anything, Maverick is thinking that he's going to be the Top Gun. And other guys like Iceman are immediately looking at Maverick like, yeah, you think so? And so, because Maverick thinks that his name is going to be on the plaque, and Viper goes on and has to realize, like, well, yeah, I like the confidence, but also, yeah, like, you guys have to realize that you need to work as a team, you need to work together. Like, if anything, yeah, like, you probably don't want to make enemies right out of the gate. But anyways, so, but they basically say that there is no second place here, that everybody has to get to the top. It's like King of the Mountain. So, they go on and everybody starts looking back on the plaque. And I think either Iceman or Slider goes on and has a joke. No, it's Iceman. He goes on and has a joke of like, well, yeah, like, the second place plaque is in the ladies' room. And Goose goes on and says, yeah, like there's two O's in Goose, because he knows that he's going to try to get to the plaque and want to be on the plaque. So now we cut to a bar that it seems the only sign I could significantly see says Animal Night, but I don't think that's what this bar is called. So we have Goose and we have Maverick that make their way into this bar, and immediately they eye Iceman. And now they're filling us in who Iceman is, and that he's a cool cucumber, and he's a guy that goes on and wears people down. That if you get sloppy, or if you get bored, or if you make any kind of mistake, he'll get to you. Like he'll go on and he'll beat you because you just get bored or sloppy, or you just make one small little flaw. So we'd all of a sudden have Slider come in, and Goose is like, "Oh yeah, Slider, you're working with Iceman, I guess." "Yeah, yeah, sure." And Slider says to Goose, like, "Oh, whose butt did you kiss to get here?" So then we have Iceman coming in and start busting the chops of Maverick. So they basically realized that, like, since Cougar did not go on and was able to come here, they're just are Iceman and Slider are realizing that since Cougar was not here, that Maverick and Goose were just his replacements, and they're just going on and they're just calling them a less than, kind of because of that. Plus, also, they're going on and talking about who's the best pilot, and so eventually they just keep busting chops. So as finally Iceman and Slider walk away, eventually both Goose and Maverick realize that they're gonna go on and they're gonna try to find some women here, and they're gonna bet between them $20 if Maverick can get anybody. So Maverick, of course, goes on and eyes Charlie, who ends up being his love interest in this entire film. So Maverick goes on and spots Charlie and immediately turns to Goose. Is like, "You know what? I don't know that this will seem really fair, but I think that woman over there is to lose that loving feeling." And Goose is already just like, "Oh no, like, I know where you're going with this. And I hate it when you go with that." So so all of a sudden, and here's kind of like the downfall of this one scene, because they have this microphone that is very woo, it's very awful. So if anything, either couldn't they have fixed that in editing, or couldn't they have just gone on and redone this scene and had a better microphone? Were they not thinking about that at all through this scene? Um, but either way, probably this movie did have to cut corners somewhere, and probably the microphone was it. Um, or maybe they didn't think that anybody was going to care. They just knew that this scene was going to be very iconic. So they're like, well, hey, whatever with the microphone, with the going on. But anyways, so Maverick starts to make his way behind Charlie and is to kind of figure out a way to kind of get her attention to where she kind of turns around. And then he gets into the "You Lost That Loving Feeling" song, and then everybody starts to chime in from behind him. That's like the Wolfman and all the other uh, fighter jet Air Force guys. They all start chiming in. More than likely because they probably had Maverick do this at some point before, but also like it's just a really good song, and it actually is pretty effective to use that kind of song as uh a really good like thing to just sing. But anyways, so we'd go on to have Maverick, who eventually by Charlie's, it's like, hey, you are a fighter pilot, right? Yeah, good, because don't quit your day job and become a singer. But it's also kind of funny because eventually Sundown takes over and he starts singing the rest of the song. But anyways, so Maverick goes on and is to do this whole song, then turn it over to Sundown, and Sundown continues to start singing through the room. And then so Maverick plops down next to Charlie, and Charlie's like, I love that song. It's a good thing you chose that exact song because I really like it. And but then Charlie's kind of realizing that maybe Maverick has probably done this a number of times. So Charlie leaves and makes her way to the bathroom because Charlie is also going to be at this place with somebody named Perry, and she's not really going to go on and give Maverick the time of day, really. And so Maverick is going to see that Perry is kind of a much older man, and so Charlie's like, well, maybe I can go on and kind of do the whole, like, maybe just keep pushing and kind of not take no for an answer and see if anything, like, I'll at least get this woman to make it seem like I've gone on and achieved something here. Excuse me. So Maverick follows Charlie to the ladies' room and they start talking about how, like, what are you gonna just keep pushing so we can just bang it out right here on this counter? And and they're back and forthing whether or not like the scenarios that they're kind of playing in their heads in this bathroom. So like there's something there and there's also like something not there. So that it's kind of a little funny bit of thing here. But either way, Charlie turns to Goose and says that Maverick was magnificent. And then Goose is like, what? Like, god dang, about $20. Well, that sucks. So now we cut back to Jester. Jester is going on and he's again uh talking about how they're bringing in the civilian specialist. If anything, you don't have to salute her, and this and that, and he goes over her qualifications and everything. So the further and further along this goes on, Jester calls up Charlie, and immediately once Charlie turns, here's where Maverick has egg on his face. So we would go on to have Charlie starts to talk about uh Migs. And eventually as she starts to talk, we'd eventually have Maverick that is to kind of chime in for a bit and be like, yeah, the information that you have is actually inaccurate. And Charlie's like, well, what are you talking about? And Maverick is like, well, hey, yeah, we were specifically flying upside down next to a MiG, and we know exactly how they can go on and how they can maneuver. And we've seen what their planes exactly look like because we were just fucking around. And we were giving the finger, and Goose took a picture of it. So, yeah, like, we know, like, how MiGs operate very well compared to you. We have a bit of information that you don't have. So, eventually, Charlie is like, oh, yeah, like, that information does seem to be very valuable. So, and eventually that'll go on and have Charlie say to Maverick, it's like, well, hey, how is that you didn't tell me before of who or what information that you had? And Maverick is like, well, I didn't think that it was important until Charlie revealed who she was. So, if anything, Charlie goes on and like, well, yeah, maybe we'll get together sometime and maybe we'll we'll talk this over. And Maverick is to go on like, well, yeah, like if anything, um, you can get around classified information. So, anyways, there's a little discreet bit of like, well, yeah, like I'll have your people call your people kind of thing. So, oh, I guess Maverick says that he was inverted, which is basically like flipped around, but still, it's the same thing. So, Jester tells everybody to get ready for a hop, which is a practice run. And they'll have several different kinds of hops. They'll have like 30 different hops, supposedly. Uh, they'll go on and they'll say like the last like hop 30 is to be the one that's like 2 weeks before graduation. So they'll go on and they'll say in this very, I think, specific hop that they have a certain barrier of how far down you can go or how far like there's a kind of a kind of barrier of where they have to meet in order to continue the rules of engagement for fights. So eventually that'll play very well into the scenario that goes on in here. So so now we cut to having right before Maverick goes out to do his hop. He goes on and he starts talking with Iceman. And we also had at the bar where Iceman talks about how Cougar was a good man, and Maverick said that he still is a good man. And that was like an interesting bit of dialogue that I kind of quickly forgot about. But, anyways, so, because right here they're still talking about Cougar. And so Iceman obviously does not like Maverick. Going on to say it's like, well, yeah, like you were covering up what was going on with Cougar. Like, if anything, also you were showboating, and Maverick says no, Cougar was doing fine. So they go on to say that for their very first hop, they'll be going up against jets that are much more advanced than them to make things more challenging. But if anything, they'll still have to figure out ways to outsmart them and outflank them and uh, and just strategize against them. So here's where we have both Maverick and Goose going up against Jester. So I think it's funny eventually how in these hops, eventually when Viper comes in and everybody is like, oh my god, it's Viper! And then Maverick is like, well, yeah, I'm sure Viper is saying like, oh my god, it's Maverick and Goose. I like that whole line. That was kind of funny. But anyways, uh, so Jester at some point is kind of like in dialogue, kind of egging on Maverick, like, hey, show me what you got, or you can run and you can't hide. But so eventually Maverick goes into the mountains into this hop, and he eventually tries to lose Jester in the mountains. And then eventually Maverick does go on and get behind, or Maverick and Goose get behind Jester, and eventually just kind of outsmart him. And as they're trying to get the shot, they finally do, and they say Jester's dead, and of course we get Jester's like, okay, return to base. Like, they won. They beat him. They outsmarted him by just hiding through the mountains. So, but we come to find that they, by Viper, will have gone on to break rules of engagement. They're only supposed to have like a certain barrier of 10,000 feet. And Maverick goes on to say that they're only underneath that barrier for mere seconds. And if anything, that shouldn't have accosted them anything. But it's all about semantics. So afterwards, after their victory, Maverick, of course, the ever so fun guy. I wanted to say something else, but I think I probably sweared enough in this video at some point. Maverick goes on to say that he's Ghost Rider and that he wants to go on and he wants to do a flyby. And we would go on to have a man by the name of Air Boss Johnson in the title, or in the credits. Air Boss Johnson goes on and says, like, nope, sorry, you can't do a flyby. The pattern is all full. Meaning that, yeah, don't go and do a flyby because there's people in this tower. So Maverick goes on and does a flyby anyways, and so Maverick does this flyby, and Air Boss Johnson goes on and is drinking coffee at the time, and he spills coffee all over himself. And there's going to be a pattern of him going on and consistently spilling things all over himself, and he'll go on and be more and more upset that, like, heads will roll, like, I'm upset, like, somebody's going to pay for this, somebody's going to pay. And then eventually Viper is going to have to go on and tell Maverick, hey, yeah, you broke the rules of engagement. So Maverick and Goose make their way back to the locker room, and they explain how they won to Iceman and Slider and all the other guys. Like Wolfman, I think, is maybe in here somewhere. Yeah, so here is where Iceman is to mention how he got Jester also. And then Iceman goes on to say to Maverick how unsafe he is and he's dangerous. And here's where Jester comes in and tells Maverick and Goose to get into Viper's office. So here's where Viper busts them down a notch after Johnson is to, again, get splashed with something. Viper brings both Maverick and Goose in to explain them about the way that they went about winning was wrong. And eventually Maverick is to try to make also his case. And so really also we have Viper that is explaining to them, hey, yeah, you would also gone on and just done this flyby. Like, if anything, hey guys, like, stop effing around. Like, come on, guys. Like, uh, because Viper is to say, it's like, well, yeah, like rules of safety exist and they're not something to be flexible or to be ignored, and I will not ignore them either. So like here on in, like you know now, like this guy is going to be like up your ass basically, uh if you don't go on and adhere to like everything they say from here on out. So basically saying either obey Viper or you're going to be gonzo. So Maverick and Goose make their way out of Viper's office, and Maverick goes on and sees Charlie nearby. And so Goose starts making jokes about him having a truck driving career after this. And Viper and Jester talk about Maverick and how much potential he has. And Viper is like, well, yeah, I used to fly with his dad. And yeah, like, he's kind of very much like his dad. Spitting image. So Jester goes on and asks, or Viper goes on and asks Jester, it's like, well, hey, for a guy like Maverick, like, I get that he's kind of a wild card, but if anything, like, if you were in a fight, would you want him with you? And so now we cut to Goose and Maverick. The two of them, they're wired. They can't sleep. So the two of them kind of get into this room and they talk to one another. And so Goose is to tell Maverick, it's like, well, hey, yeah, like, I know that you're trying to get out of your daddy's shadow, but you know what? I have a family. Like, I have to, like, I need this job. So, like, if anything, I don't want to blow it. And Maverick is like, well, yeah, I get that. Like, you're the only family I have. So if anything, uh, like, I'm gonna make this work. And so we now cut to Maverick going on and in this class and being instructed by Charlie. And Maverick goes on and goes into this scenario where he goes on and he talks about guns, and Charlie's saying about how that's a little bit of aggressive, and 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 Maverick is like, well, hey, yeah, like, how's about asking me out for dinner being aggressive? And Charlie says, well, yeah, I don't date my students. And so plus all she's like, well, yeah, I need a little bit more than just fancy flying to get my attention. So Charlie's going on and busting Maverick's chops because, again, there's a little bit of cryptic secrecy here. But eventually, Charlie goes on and hands Maverick this note that says dinner tonight, 5:30 sharp, and gives him an address and says the word classified because Maverick had just talked about uh, classified when the two of them first met, about like, well, hey, yeah, like, I can go on and tell you, but I'd have to kill you. Because eventually he had gone on to talk about that whole MiG fight, and Charlie's like, well, yeah, tell me more about what you did. And Maverick is like, well, I can't tell you that, it's classified. And she's like, no, you can tell me. And so he goes on and tells her about the whole inverted thing. So Maverick gets up and then Slider insults him, saying how, hey man, I guess you got shot down. And then Maverick turns to Slider. It's like, hey man, you stink. Like, so now we cut to the volleyball. So basically, it's very hard for me to say anything about any of this volleyball stuff. If anything, like the big takeaway is that there is actually a pretty interesting, even though it feels more so one sided, that a lot of times we're seeing more of like Maverick and Goose doing well than we're seeing Iceman and Slider doing well. We also see that like Slider is really pumping out the guns because I'm like, God dang, Slider, beefy muscle of a man. But anyways, the real takeaway here is we're really seeing more oftentimes that Maverick and Goose are looking good in this whole volleyball thing. And it gets to the point to where they supposedly even things out, and Maverick starts to go on a run and starts throwing on this shirt and this jacket, which I'm like, I don't get how Maverick is to be throwing on this really thick coat for how hot it is. But whatever, right? Like, I guess he just has to be really effing sweaty in this scene, anyways, right? Hence why he's probably just so sweaty in this entire film. Because so many layers he's wearing. But, anyways, so Goose is telling Maverick, hey man, we like just evened it up. We have one more game. And Maverick is like, no, I gotta go. And Goose is like, no, 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 one more game. And he's like, no, like I have to leave. I have something going on. So Maverick leaves, and it seems like he's late for the date with Charlie. I don't know what time it is because it never says what time he gets there, but I'm assuming it's very late. So Maverick makes his way to Charlie's place to find out that she's not answering, and so he keeps popping by the rest of the house to see if Charlie's still there, eventually making his way into popping in through windows and doors to see if she's still there. And then he goes on to immediately apologizes. So Maverick goes on and asks if he can take a quick shower, and Charlie goes on and says that she's hungry. So the two of them go on and have a meal between one another, and so the big thing that is coming from here is that Maverick is going to talk about his parents more so than I think anything else. A lot of it is just kind of like little bits and backstory here or there of maybe Charlie, that she's not always like she's kind of temporarily here. Because eventually we'll come to find out that Charlie's going to go on to like Washington, and I think eventually Maverick is either going to follow her there or going to go back to California to be the whole instructor for Top Gun. But anyways, so the main thing here is Maverick talking about his mother, about how eventually his mother just used to love music, and the music that they're listening to in the background kind of brings him back to his mother, and how she loved this kind of music and would listen to it over and over, whereas Maverick eventually got sick of it, and coincidentally, his mother had gotten sick and died. And so then Charlie is to go on and ask about Maverick's father. And Maverick's like, oh, you don't know about my dad? Like, I thought that was common knowledge that you would probably go on and do some investigation of my father and know more than I would. And Charlie's like, no, I never got that far. So Charlie goes into the story of he, the thing that he knew about his dad is that supposedly his dad had run off with a jet fighter and had kind of done something dishonorable, but Maverick is to think that his father was a a hero, and whatever he had gone on to do was the right thing. So, but he goes on and he talks about how it's such a big mystery of what really happened. But at some point, Viper will go on and set Maverick aside and tell him the truth about what happened. And yeah, like his dad was a hero. Um, and they'll go into the whole story about this at some point in the movie. As it seems that Maverick is to go out of his way to meet up with Viper at his own home and try to figure out what his options are. So Charlie is to be very much interested in Maverick and say that their relationship between the two of them could eventually get complicated. And Maverick tells Charlie, it's like, boy, I'm going to go and I'm going to take that shower. Like, if anything, I think this smarter bit of dialogue here would have had, honestly, Maverick say, hey, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to take that shower. And maybe he jokes at her and says, hey, do you want to join me? Like, and she obviously will go on and say no. And then he'll take that shower anyways. So the two of them meet up in this elevator after it looks like Maverick had taken a shower, but he'll still look like he needs one because Charlie will make that joke. So Charlie then goes on to finally reveal to Maverick the intel of which that he had isn't really important to her anymore. But if anything, her focus of her being here is that she has a job to do. And eventually there is going to be a man that comes into the elevator and then he leaves. Maverick goes on and turns her, it's like I understand that, but if anything, we could probably still be we could still be secretly lovers. Because eventually Charlie will start to fall for Maverick, and eventually she'll tell him something that she couldn't have said to other people, because immediately, if she would have said it, everyone would have known and they would have saw right through her that she had fallen for Maverick. So, anyways, because she goes on and she says that his skill as a fighter or a jet fighter is to kind of be in the level of a genius. But yeah, like she can't go on and honestly kind of really say that because again, she would be showing her hand a little bit too much. Anyways, we now cut to Goose and Maverick, and they're going on and they're talking about Carol, who's played by Meg Ryan's character. So we'd come to find out that Goose kind of tells Carol everything, because when Carol comes in, Meg Ryan's character, like she knows everything about Maverick. There's a joke about how Goose is to be this like church going, family focused guy, and how Goose is to say that Maverick doesn't have any woman, and Carol's like, well, yeah, he probably doesn't have one woman, he has 8 of them, and it's kind of funny. So Carol shows up, swings her arms at Goose, and then we cut to Viper that is going on, and and talk about the choices that people have to make. That some choices may go on and be that they're not going to engage in things, that maybe they're going to go on and try to figure out how to best save their aircraft and not go into things, and try to stay out of getting paid into a corner or get into bad positions. So as more and more Viper gets into this bit of dialogue, eventually he sees Charlie coming his way. It's like, hey, Charlie, chime in whenever you like. So, as they look through this schematics of this scenario that they kind of built up here, Charlie looks at it and is to be like, you know what? I don't really think that this fight that you guys have kind of formed here, like, I think that like you need to kind of think more in the air. And Maverick chimes in. It's like, well, hey, if you think you die, and Charlie's like, well, isn't that a big risk for a $30 million plane to not think in the air? And that's quite a big gamble to make. So eventually, Charlie starts talking about vertical moves and all these other kind of strategies, and so Charlie does relent that Maverick's strategy could lead to a victory, but if anything, it's not a really smart way about going about things. Or it's not probably, it will still lead to the win, but if anything, like, it probably is more dangerous or risky to do. So that's why Charlie is wanting to come up with other strategies. Honestly, really, Charlie is just wanting to just show, like, she's trying to prove why she's there and why everyone isn't as good as she is. Because she has to prove her worth to all these guys. I get it. But it's not a gender thing. It's just she's proving why she needs to continue to be questioning everything, which is nice, or which is cool. So as Charlie is to say how there's better textbook maneuvers that could help them in this avenue, eventually Maverick is to just be so upset by that, by just like going on and having Charlie busting his chops and insulting his strategy, had Maverick just be walking away from Charlie even while she's calling out for him, consistently calling him Lieutenant, Lieutenant, and he's not listening to her. Going on, and when even she gets close to his motorcycle, he's revving the engine. Like, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Off. Yeah, like, I'm completely ignoring you if that wasn't apparent. So, Maverick goes onto his cycle and guns it out of there, and Charlie in her car follows, and she almost gets into an accident trying to follow him. And finally, we get to a point where Maverick does park his cycle and finally does talk to Charlie because she keeps following him. So here's where Charlie goes on about how she thinks that Maverick, if she would have waited to listen to what she had to say about him, she does feel that he is, again, a genius, but also everyone would have gone on and seen through her if she said that. And that she is also to admit that she's fallen in love with Maverick, and the two of them kiss. So this leads him into a bit of a lovemaking scene, where we'd come to the find of them like against this wall, and they're kissing. And if you were to go on and see Risky Business, like a lot of the scenes of Risky Business are very similar to this scene in the Top Gun. So we next follow up with Charlie, who's to wake up the next day with this paper airplane next to her. And here's where we finally get the I feel the need for speed line here, as we go on to have, I think, Hollywood and Wolfman turn to Goose and Maverick and say, hey, yeah, guys, you know what? Guess what? Ice just won his last hop. And Maverick and Goose are like, oh? So, like, okay, well, I guess, like, we have to match him then for how close they are. So Goose and Maverick get onto their plane and get roaring and get going. And here's, of course, where Viper comes into the field, and everybody is on like it's Donkey Kong, and they're like, "Oh my God, Viper's here!" And here's where, of course, Maverick turns into the whole like, "Well, yeah, I guess I'm sure Viper is going on and being afraid that Goose and Maverick are here too. Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure he's quaking in his boots." So, what happens in this scenario as I try to rush through it all, because I really have to get going for how far away I am from the runtime of this movie and everything. So we come to find that Hollywood is to be after Jester, and as Viper is kind of far away off to the side, what eventually happens is that Maverick is to back up Hollywood while he's going after Jester, but then eventually Maverick consistently sees that Viper is off to the side, and he just can't let it go. So Maverick goes on and tells Hollywood, it's like, Hollywood, you look real pretty. So, like, you go on, you go after Jester, and I'll get mine. I have to go after Viper. Because he's obviously just teased too much by Viper just being, like, so tantalizing to want to go on and go after. So, eventually, as Maverick goes after Viper, and actually at some points Viper is actually kind of impressed at some points. He's like, man, this kid is good. All right. Like he's looking and trying to figure out where he is. So as things are to go on, we would of course have Maverick that is going after Viper, and eventually they're too close for combat, and so Maverick, I think, has to switch to guns here from what I remember. And eventually what ends up happening is that while both Maverick and Goose get distracted, Jester goes on and takes the two of them out. And then eventually, we of course have the Goose moment where he's like, great balls of fire, and now Goose and Maverick realize they're dead. And so Viper's like, okay, gentlemen. It's also kind of funny when Viper comes into frame, how he starts talking about the weather, because he could just say anything that scares the crap out of him, because like, oh my God, that's Viper. So now we cut to back to the locker room again, and here's, of course, another time where the Iceman has to go on and break down Maverick. So Viper goes on and Iceman goes on and breaks down Maverick after Jester looks at Maverick and tells him, hey, never leave your wingman. So Iceman goes on and says, yeah, it's not your flying, it's your attitude. The enemy's not dangerous, you are. And you're foolish. And if anything, like, I think he says something about, like, and no one likes you or no one likes to work with you. It's something like that. So come to find out, regardless of how good Iceman is, Viper got to Iceman just like uh just like Jester had gotten to them. So if anything, yeah, like they're both kind of still even. So it'll kind of come down to the wire. So Maverick turns to Goose and he's like, you know what? I made a mistake. Like, I'll admit that. Like, I got distracted by Viper and, like, I was stupid. So, if anything, I'm going to tell you right now, it's never going to happen again. And Goose is like, okay, good. Like, all right. So, we have Maverick that is to go on and look at a picture of him and his father, I believe, because there's no dialogue that says otherwise. He never says, dad, or anything like that. So we just have to assume that it's him and his dad, because otherwise, why is he holding onto this picture? And then he goes to sleep. So now we get the scene of Goose, who's at this piano playing Great Balls of Fire. I wish that this scene would have probably came a little bit earlier, but I guess maybe this exact scene was not exactly positioned in the right place. Obviously. So Goose is going on and playing Great Balls of Fire on this piano, and Carol is going on and saying about how a goof Goose is, and that Maverick should go over there and try to rein Goose in. And eventually Maverick just goes over there and joins him and sings him with the song also, and just looks like a goof, because that's what you kind of got to do in life. You got to just kind of look funny, or also kind of do goofy things like Maverick does all the time. Like, honestly, what Maverick's goofing off gets him very much in trouble. Goose's goofing off is to just be stuff that's like singing music or what, like, so it's not going to go on uh and have him be like punished at work or whatever. But anything, like, his goofing off is just kind of like getting women and whatever. Like, it's all kinds of or not, well, in Goose's case, not getting women, but Maverick getting women. Anyways. So the point is, here we have Carol that turns to Charlie and is talking about how Carol knows that Maverick is to be off the market, that he has fallen in head over heels for Charlie. Carol knows Maverick very well, and so Charlie's like, he really is into me. So Carol, Charlie, Maverick, everybody, they make their way to the piano. They all sing Great Balls of Fire. And then we cut to the motorcycle scene where obviously Charlie and Maverick are drunk, and Charlie ends up calling Maverick a big stud and take me to bed or lose me forever. So we now have Hop 31. This is to be the last hop before graduation. So yeah, we're getting to the big part of the film. The whole accident, the whole Goose death, and the part that everybody knows from this movie is to be the big enchilada. So we have Goose and Maverick here. that make their way out, and they of course are with Iceman and Slider because of how very neck and neck they are, how very tied they are. So kind of put them together so that way they're forced to work with one another. So we have Goose that's going on and basically doing like the whole like World Series bottom of the ninth, like this is for all the marbles and the score is tied and da, da. So uh so as Maverick try or as Iceman tries to take the lead of everything, and eventually Maverick starts to get very much annoyed with Iceman for how long he's effing taking and how Maverick is trying to be Iceman's wingman and trying to stay there for him. Because, again, the whole wingman thing is like, okay, I have to be his wingman. So, Iceman goes on and on about how many different kind of seconds he'll need uh, to take out the bogey, the enemy. And the closer and closer that Iceman says that he is, Maverick is like, hey man, I could take the shot from here. Like, come on, like, take the shot. Get it, Iceman. Do it. Like, take him out. So eventually it finally gets to the point where Iceman just pulls out because he just can't get it. And so eventually what happens is Maverick tries to take the lead here. And what eventually happens is that all of a sudden Maverick and Goose's plane loses like hydraulics or loses their engines, and then all of a sudden they go into this spiral that they can't get out of. And eventually they'll wash it off as some kind of mechanical failure, and eventually they'll reinstate Maverick because there was nothing he could do. And there was like no discipline or anything to because it was all just an accident. Like the plane basically was to malfunction in a way that was to cause everything that happened, and it wasn't on pilot error. If you want to go on and find a story about a same similar situation, you probably have to go on and find like Denzel Washington movie like Flight. Um, how eventually they have like air traffic controllers and they bring people in to kind of assess the scenario of whether or not that like how well Denzel's character could have been flying that plane, or how did he do it? And he has no idea how because he was drunk the whole time. And eventually, they come to figure out that he was drunk flying the plane. Uh, and he does all that good and saves all those people, but also he gets in big trouble for it and loses his pilot license because he was drunk the whole time. So eventually what happens here is Maverick is calling out to Goose that there's no way for him to be able to reach the ejection button. If they don't, they will probably not be able to eject. They'll die. They'll whatever. So what eventually happens is Goose is able to hit the ejection button or the lever or whatever. But what does happen is Goose ends up having his chair launch out, but it smashes into the glass or the window of the fighter jet, and he just gets crushed. Oh well, Maverick gets out and he's fine. He's safe. He ejected, and the two of them land in the ocean because Iceman is letting people know in the movie, like, hey, yeah, they're over the water. So they splash. There's be some, I guess, some National Guard or somebody that goes on and saves them. And so while Maverick is clutching onto Goose, and or Maverick knew that Goose was dead. Like immediately when Viper is telling Maverick, yeah, Goose is dead, Maverick is like, yeah, I know. I knew that he was dead. So we have I'm assuming, let's go with National Guard here, telling Maverick, hey, you gotta let him go. We need to kind of wheel him into the chopper, or kind of rope him into the chopper. So Goose goes first, then Maverick goes second, obviously. So Maverick comes back, and then Viper ends up giving Maverick the news of Goose being dead. So after going on and immediately telling Goose, or Viper, let's get the name straight here. Man, I always have problems with names. Viper goes on and tells Maverick that Goose is dead, and then eventually also says, like, yeah, you gotta shake this off. Because if anything, Viper relays a story where he had gone on to lose 10 men in Vietnam, and to kind of relate to what Maverick is going through. So Viper tells Maverick that he needs to just let it go. And so now we have Maverick that's in Charlie's car. And honestly, Maverick is just kind of acting like a person who is like, I guess he's going through a loss, but also it just kind of feels like it's like a person who is to have like lost their keys and couldn't figure out where the keys are, but like they're still just so like annoyed at the fact that they have lost their keys. So like, man, like if only I didn't lose my keys, I'd go on and be able to have them, and then I'd be able to get in my car and I'd drive somewhere. Like that's what it kind of feels like Maverick is right now. Like he's not really like crushed. Like this is family. Like this is his best friend. Like this guy should be like destroyed, but also like you would think that maybe he would be completely broken right now when he has a moment to be just with Charlie, and then the two of them can kind of hug it out, and or either that or maybe uh, Maverick can really lean on her and be like, well, yeah, I really need you right now because like I just lost my best friend and like he was my brother and da, da, da. Yeah, no, like Maverick is just like, yeah, like I just wish he wasn't gone, and it's just like it just feels like the whole lost keys thing. It's very weird. So like God, I want him back. Like that yeah, that whole line delivery is just so weird. So uh so Charlie's like, well, yeah, I'm here if you need me. Sure. So Maverick goes on and looks at a picture of Goose, and here's where more that he's really much more hiding back emotions. And eventually he makes his way to Carol, and the two of them hug, and like Carol even has more emotion than honestly Maverick does throughout these bit of scenes here, but also they're like really fighting it back here. So I really go on and I appreciate that at least. So Carol goes on and she said that like basically for Goose, like Maverick was the one for him, that he probably could have gone on and could have flown with anybody else, but he wouldn't have been as happy as when he was flying with Maverick. So, like, that kind of tells a lot about their relationship if we didn't get enough of it. That, like, it really just seemed that the two of them really were to be like really looking out for one another. They were their own wingmans, and like they did feel like brothers in a way. Um but yeah, but like to go on and really just be like, well, yeah, like the two of them really were going on and wanting to work towards one goal. Um and the two of them were very kind of like in sync and together. So here's where Maverick goes on to like the board of everybody who is to go on and explain to him that all of it was to have been an accident because the plane malfunctioned, and that if anything, Maverick is going to be able to go on and get back to flying very soon. And immediately we have Viper that turns to Jester. It's like get him in a plane right away. Like get him some reps. Like this guy's gonna have to go on and really we're gonna have to push him to to get to get like back to get back to like uh to not be kind of just so weighed down by the whole Goose situation. And yeah, so immediately we have Maverick and Sundown. Maverick goes into this scenario, and even when he is behind Jester and Jester's like, hey, yeah, come on, man, like take the shot, yeah, get me, come on, come after me, we have Maverick that is just going on and consistently just kind of following Jester and not being able to at all pull the trigger. And Sundown is like, hey man, you can get him at any time, like come on, like like we can win. um so eventually, after Maverick just can't get it done, he can't pull the trigger no matter what he does, he just can't get there. We then would go on and have Sundown that is chewing Maverick out. Like, hey man, we could have got him, we could have won, we could have. Blah, blah, blah. And finally, Maverick grabs onto Sundown. It's like, I will fire when I'm goddamn good and ready. And then he walks off, and we just kind of see Maverick just, or we see Iceman that's kind of like, oh yeah, like he's really still dealing with that loss of Goose. Like I get it. They're like everybody loved Goose. Like that's what eventually Iceman goes on and tells Maverick. Because he goes on and he tells him that right away after Jester and Viper kind of uh, looking on and like, yeah, it's only been a few days. We got to just keep pushing him, and he might just make it back, but he just needs time. So just keep sending him out anyways. So Iceman goes on, and it kind of feels like he's like fighting, trying to be nice here. Like Iceman is just like, yeah, like I really want to be a dick to him, but like I need to be nice right now. So Iceman turns to Maverick. It's like, you know what? Like everybody loved Goose. Like yeah, like I'm sorry about him. So like even Iceman of all people is actually just chiseling away his horrible heart to finally grow 2 sizes this day and be nice to freaking Maverick. And then he walks off. So we'd come to find also here that as Maverick is cleaning out his locker, he freaking quits and he's done. The Wolfman is to go on and overhear that Maverick is quitting, so he goes on the phone to call somebody, and it seems that they already know that he's quitting. So the word is quickly getting around that Maverick is to have quit. But I guess this scene exactly here with the Wolfman getting on the phone is to let us know, the audience, that Maverick has kind of finally quit here. He's kind of had enough. So Maverick goes in this bar, and we can really just see how this quitting decision has really affected him. To where Charlie comes in and she's like, "What are you doing? Like, you're a guy that, like, you're not happy unless you're doing Mach 2 when your hair's on fire." And so Maverick goes on and tells Charlie, it's like, "Well, yeah, I heard you got that job in Washington. Congratulations." And she's like, "Well, yeah, thanks." But, like, Charlie tells Maverick at the beginning of this, like, "Well, yeah, like, but you didn't say goodbye to me." As well as also, she's like, "Well, yeah, but I'm not leaving until I say goodbye to you." And because she knows that he's quitting, and she's like, "Where are you going? Like, you don't have a plan after this, after you, don't you? Like, I'm sure you have nothing planned." So Charlie reminds Maverick that it's not his fault. And if anything, like, what happened to Maverick? Like, Maverick is always a larger than life character, and, like, where is that guy now? And so Maverick is to tell Charlie that it's over, that it's all over. Uh, so so Charlie is to go on and say to Maverick, it's like, "You know what? You went to that school. You didn't learn anything, did you?" And so now that Maverick is no longer Maverick, here's where Charlie calls him Pete Mitchell. Because there's little bits of time where they go on and they say his real name, but they stick with Maverick for a good chunk of this movie. So here's where Maverick makes his way back to Viper to see what options he has to maybe see if whether or not if he chooses to quit or if he chooses to go with his classmates to celebrate the whole, like, he has enough points to graduate and everything like that. So eventually what happens is Maverick goes on and speaks with Charlie, and here, or Maverick goes on and speaks with Viper, my bad. Names again, I'm sorry. So the two of them go on, and here's where Viper tells Maverick about the story of his father, about what really happened, and how this whole story could kind of end his career. Talking about how his father was in the worst dogfight ever, um, how there was bad guys all over the sky, uh, and so all the story eventually leads is to say that uh, this story shouldn't have been told because it's over enemy lines. And that's the reason why they shouldn't be talking about it, because it's a whole classified story. But if anything, Viper is willing to tell Maverick this to kind of gain his trust, and vice versa. But anyways, so Maverick goes on and turns, or Viper turns to Maverick. It's like, "Well, what are you really here for?" And he goes on like, "Okay, I want to know my options." So Viper is like, "Well, yeah, you can graduate with your team if you decide to turn up at it. Like, but if you want to quit, quit, disappear. Like, yeah, be done with it." But so Viper can understand if Maverick is to want to quit, because, like, what happened to him, yeah, it could happen to anybody. But so uh eventually what does happen is eventually also Viper is a talk about the things that Maverick has learned, and that eventually it's like, hey, our job here is to always figure out and learn and kind of move on. So Maverick goes on and kind of is to thank Viper because it's a Sunday, and I'm sure he had other things planned. So Maverick makes his way to see Charlie's place, and she finds that, or he finds that she's moved on and her place is for rent. So Maverick again goes on his motorcycle to see another jet fly by, and he makes his way to the graduation as everyone is asking where exactly he is. So Maverick shows up, finds out that Iceman is Top Gun, so eventually Maverick turns Iceman and says congratulations to him. So we then go on shortly thereafter this and have Viper that is going on and telling everybody where they're heading because there's a crisis afoot. And so they give them all their papers of where they're going. And this kind of feels like the Clint Eastwood the one Ridge movie, whatever the that title of that was. He goes on, he does like a military film. Uh Hacksaw Ridge or something like that. Something Ridge. I don't remember what it's called exactly. You'd have to IMDb it. Plus, also, I need to take the time to just kind of wrap this up, anyways. So, we now cut to 24 hours later in the Indian Ocean. So, here's where Stinger comes back in. It's like, okay, like in 1 hour, you guys are gonna go on and you're gonna be forming a rescue. So, uh, if anything, this is gonna be a dogfight to where Stinger is gonna go on and say, yeah, you guys are gonna go and get into hostile territory. You're gonna go on and you're gonna return. You're gonna you're gonna return fire and attack people. Whatever. Uh, anyways, so they go on and they say it's like, well, yeah, like you're basically gonna do everything that you've been trained for, and so as they set up who all is gonna be where, Maverick ends up with Merlin, who is to have been the guy who was with Cougar. So it's kind of same old like song and dance where now Maverick has to go on and take the place of Cougar. So as they're going on and as they're setting everybody up, Iceman doesn't like the fact that Maverick is going to be teaming up with him. So eventually Iceman makes his way to Stinger, but like, hey, yeah, I don't like that Maverick is going to be with me. And Stinger's like, I don't care. Like, you all are going out there. Like, just go. So they all start rocketing off, and Maverick is to be the one that's kind of stuck further behind, that he's kind of waiting in the wings. So Iceman Iceman and is it Hollywood? Yeah, it could be Hollywood. Um, I haven't quite seen the other guy yet. Uh, oh yeah, it is Hollywood. So what ends up happening here in this dogfight is Iceman and Hollywood go out there, and eventually what happens is they get into a fight, and Hollywood's plane ends up getting uh ends up getting taken out. Um, I think some of them. I think Hollywood uh, has his plane completely get destroyed, and yeah, so that then forces Maverick to get out on the field, and as he's going on and he's flying out, he grabs onto Goose's dog tags and says, "Goose, like, you gotta help me out here. You gotta speak to me, man." And so Maverick goes on and tells Iceman that he's gonna go to Supersonic and that he's 20 seconds out. So, or 30 seconds out. So eventually, the longer that Maverick takes to get back there, the more that Iceman will find out that there's so many threats that they're going to have to face off against. Because it'll eventually come to be that they think that there's, I think, like, hey, yeah, maybe there's two. Wait, maybe there's more than that. Eventually, they'll get to a point where there's 5 different Russian planes against them, or MiG planes against them. And at some point, we'll have Maverick that eventually, like, can't exactly lock in, and Maverick eventually has to be kind of told by Iceman, it's like, hey, come on, Maverick, we got to help Iceman. And so Maverick eventually loses it, but then eventually he then snaps back. And so eventually, one by one, Maverick goes on and is to figure out a way to just outmaneuver a lot of the enemies here, or the bogeys here. And eventually is to go on and take them out all by missiles. And then eventually starts to run out of missiles because how many of the threats that they've gone up against. So eventually, the further this fight goes along, we start to find that Iceman is getting gunned down and getting hit quite a bit left and right, and eventually Maverick comes in to be his wingman and uh, tries to help him out here. So eventually, at one point, Maverick is to tell Iceman to pull really hard left, so that way he can get to this other guy. And then he tries to shoot him down or gun him down, and he misses. So eventually, Iceman is to tell Maverick that there's someone on his tail, and eventually and Merlin's looking back. So eventually, what Maverick does is eventually he does the move where when the guy gets ever so close to him, Maverick does this really hard break, and then the bogey goes on and gets in front of him, and then Maverick blasts him and takes him out. So we'd go on and again after Maverick takes out everybody and wins it all. Eventually, we again have Maverick that tries to request for a flyby, and we again have the same guy who's Johnson, and he has another thing of coffee, and as Maverick asks, "Hey, can I do a flyby?" and the guy's like, "Nope, you can't do a flyby. Everything, the pattern is full." So Maverick goes on and does a flyby anyways, and the guy, of course, spills the coffee all over himself, and he's like, "God, I hate that guy." So Maverick goes on and is to, of course, get out of his flyer. We'd go on to have Iceman meet up with Maverick and say it's like, well, hey, yeah, you're so dangerous, but I'd have you be my wingman any day. And Maverick is like, well, you're gonna be my wingman. And then the two of them, they just kind of hug it out. And then there's like these weird moments where they're just kind of consistently just kind of still waving their hands in the air, like, yeah, we still did a thing. And then they have to just kind of figure out when they have to kind of really just start to walk off here. Um, and it's kind of awkward. But eventually they do go on and they do walk off. And that's when we have Stinger that comes in with Maverick and starts talking to him about uh eventually Top Gun again and what Maverick wants to do. And Maverick is like, well, yeah, I want to be an instructor. And Stinger's like, instructor? You? Okay. So really after that, we go on to have Maverick that goes on and makes his way to this bar, and all of a sudden he goes on and he sees this bit of jukebox that is playing the song that he knows very well of You've Got That Love and Feeling. And then as Charlie gets his coat and starts to look around, all of a sudden Charlie appears, and they start talking about like, well, hey, like, if anything, maybe this whole thing is gonna be very complicated, but if anything, we might as well give it a shot. So the two of them, they go on and they kiss, and then eventually they ride off in the sunset, and eventually that's when they go on and they get the whole credits of who all the people are, and then they do one last like kind of bit of jet flying and whatever. With that said, yeah, I want to go on and try to get out of here as quickly as possible because I know that a lot of people will probably complain how long this took. Honestly, for this video, this freaking movie is kind of very complicated, but whatever. I guess it could be probably easily simplified by a lot of people. I think I probably went way into detail, but if anything, I'm not going to try again to try to get this. Like, this is going to be one and freaking done. Um, Plus, also, I think at the end of there, I very much rushed it because I kind of gave away and threw away my notes because I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go on. I'm going to wing the rest of this and kind of see like the short aspect of this all because probably not anyone tuned into this whole video. Man, that I really want to go on and try to like say that these videos were going to get a lot shorter and they just get multi-hour long anyways. I'm still trying to at least say that I'm trying to get these somewhere into 2 hours in length, but god dang it, like every freaking time, like I just can't figure out how to like narrow these down, or I can't not want to say more detail. But either way, I'm gonna say that this is gonna be an upload. Because I'm just like, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna go on and try to redo this again to try to get this shorter. Um, Plus, also, yeah, I think Top Gun is a complex enough movie that I don't want to go on and try to squeeze this down. But anyways, that said, I'm going to squeeze my way out of here so that way you can go on and get this uploaded. Uh, at some point, I was kind of throwing around whether or not to kind of have some videos that I had at my other channel over here that didn't probably do as well, but I'm just kind of throwing them and chucking them up at extra content on here because also honestly when I think about it, if there's some videos that didn't perform really well on that other channel, I can just chuck them on here as extra content, not something that will be like stuff that'll kind of be stuff that'll be like, well, yeah, instead of me having to go and actually come up with content, I'll just plop this old stuff. No, like it'll be extra stuff on top of what I was already trying to do. Um, because honestly, uh, there is at a point now where I'm kind of looking at how much content I'm really doing right now, and I don't feel like it's enough for this channel. So I'm just trying to scramble and every day trying to at least do some kind of video. Um, but also it's kind of like, man, I'm kind of doing these every day now. Um, or there's sometimes where I'm just kind of trying to scrape together getting a video done. Um, I really should try to go on and try to get to like the quicker content, like the episode things that I was trying to gonna want to do for one day, but it kind of just becomes that I'm like, oh no, I'll just watch a movie and this will be an easy thing to get done, right? Yeah, that doesn't happen. But anyways, I'm gonna get that out of here because I know that a lot of people will already complain about the runtime of this video, so I'm sorry. Uh, if anything, I'm just trying to do these reviews. I know that eventually the length of the videos kind of really did do a thing that like really hurt me when I was to go on and do reviews in the other channel. Eventually, just the run times were just like everybody was like just complaining and whining about the how long videos were. I'm like, I'm sorry, like this is just how I do things. Plus, also, this has been a movie that I haven't reviewed before, so it's not as easy to break it down because I've never broke it down before. Like, uh, honestly, even Ghost Rider I'd gone on to review before, but even that like took even more time than the previous one. Um, and also, yeah, like there's some where it's like, man, I got that done in a pretty decent amount of time, or also I kind of did it around the exact amount of time that I did the other one. Um, so it's just like it's kind of just like, man, I'm just crap at this. It's a crapshoot of when I can actually go on and get this all done. So I'm gonna get this done now so I can get this uploaded. I still don't really know what all I'm gonna be putting up on the channel as far as stuff, but I'm just plopping down videos and hoping for the best. Um, because I'll say I'll get like, oh yeah, I know I want to go on and do this piece of content, and then that falls through. Or also I'm just like, well, I'll do these movies instead, or I'll do this project. So yeah, so I definitely do have a lot planned in mind, but I don't think that it's all gonna be really any good. Um, I think at this point, like I probably should be trying much more to ride on my past successes of prior channel than making up all these other kind of either new kind of projects that I don't know where they're gonna go or where they're gonna land. But again, I continue to make mistakes. But also, it's kind of surprising that there's a number of people that at least go on and be watching the content that I am kind of putting down on this channel that I'm involved with right now. Um, and I'm grateful that people are watching those bits of content because, if anything, for me, like I'm to just be very grateful that like that gives me optimism that when I start really going on, and soon, I definitely will soon, um, keep plopping down videos. I have the plan that I want to go on and start putting stuff project wise down. So hopefully this will be one of them very soon to go out. So bye everybody. Bye everybody.